Kyle here from allmediareviews.blogspot.com. Here to do not the last release, but the last proper full-length release. Well, Indigo Child. All right, so maybe not full, not quite, but the last of the ACT records. And I flubbed it yesterday. Couldn't remember the name of it, and I did find of course, switch the jewel cases. I've got the T-shirt I'm wearing today with the title. I must have bought on that tour. It might have been the tour with Between the Buried and Me. I'll go into a little bit of the tour information maybe here, maybe another video, more of my live stories. But the Act 5, the Hymns with the Devil in Confessional, which came out, as I looked it up, September 9th, 2016, which, a couple significant things about that. That was almost a year later, like a year and 5 days, because September 4th, 2015 is when Act 4 came out. And here's the vinyl. And, well, September 2016 was among other things that I remember, I'll never forget, of course, my wedding. And it was just 5 years, this past September, but it was a few weeks later. And the Deer Hunter did come here that September. Unfortunately, it was like a week before the wedding, and I just could not go. As much as I'm a lifetime member, and I'm, the ticket wouldn't cost me anything. I just could not convince my wife, or my fiance at the time, that, I have the time to do this, and I don't have the time to do this for the wedding or whatever else. Because I think it was even like a few days, like 5 days before. I have to look it up. I didn't go to the show. It's like that was the first or second time first headline show that Deer Hunter ever did in my hometown that I missed. But yeah. So the connections with Act 4. I said it came out a year and 5 days after. And the biggest thing also about this record, Act 5, Hymns with the Devil and Confessional, is beyond being like I said, like the sort of the last. And the last album in the Acts series of albums, concept albums, and part of the story. Here's the blue and white. I remember I probably did show this, and this one also, just like Act 4, doesn't have. I don't even know if any of the vinyl, actually, I don't remember, have the actual track names on the records. But it's like a blue and it looks like a lifesaver or something, like a mint. But it fits the sort of artwork. It matches the artwork style and color approach. And let's see here. Here's the book. I'll show the second part, the second disc in a minute. The big book. Which, the truth is I'm guilty in that I've looked through this maybe once. And I'm not even sure. I bought it. I'm pretty sure, like a lot of the records, I end up buying them after. Even in real time, I bought them when they came out. Pretty much all of them, other than Act 1. Well, actually, no. They started really issuing vinyl about a little over 10 years ago. I bought them in real time. But the vinyl records have been known and to not be released, at the same time as the digital release / even the CD. So. Let's see here. So that in the second part, I'm pretty sure it's the same color. But it was recorded. It was written and or recorded, or at least within the same time frame. I mean, Casey wrote and recorded, or I mean, and there's a pretty clear connection. Obviously, it was the album that was made right after it. In terms of it was released right after it. So it's pretty much the same. The blue. The Lifesaver mint, blue and white colored vinyl. So, on this one at least. But it has a lot of connections to Act 4. Sound-wise, it resembles it the most compared to the other Act records in the Color Spectrum and Migrant, for the most part. And, again, it was written and recorded. I didn't look it up about Gavin Castleton, but he is on this album, and he was part of the band, at least from the start when actually this album was being recorded, not written. I have to look that up for Act 4, but in fact, the track, The Haves Have Not, which is track number 8, the eighth song, has him as like a co-lead vocals. And then, that's a song that when I first listened to this album in 2016, and when it came out again, I was in the throes of my wedding, and I had other things, occupying my time than keeping up with every record. 2016, they had a lot of great records that year. Cloud Cult's The Seeker and Fate's Warning's Theories of Flight. Marillion's album came out the same month, I think, their last record, Fear. But that's a song that I think of this record so much for, but it's not a bad song. I think in the whole concept, I'm trying to understand more about the concept. I think I'm going to do a separate video about the concept at some point soon, of all 5 acts. The 2 voices are maybe they're supposed to be representing the son and I think the mother. The son and the mother, the son and the father. Maybe both. I think it's the mother. If you look at, this is with the devil and this woman, there's a female character in all the act stories, I'm pretty sure. It's just, how to represent it. But I think that's why Casey wanted to use Gavin. Gavin's got even a higher range style vocal, so he would be able to sing the voice of the son. But so let's get into what's great about this record. I think of this record for. It's not a record that has like those shining stars, those sort of just banger, trademark, over the top tracks that you listen to over and over again and are just earworms. Other than, I would say, especially one track. I mean, there's some catchy songs on here, but there's one track specifically that stands out and is a top, again, spoiling my, if I ever do a future songs video, which I probably will, for Kevin, Marillion, and everyone else, at least top 20, maybe top 10 song in all the Deer Hunter is the song Light. It's just gorgeous. It's so clean and so the chords, the performance, the sort of dynamics, and it has an earworm, and it's like a perfect melodic singer-songwriter track with some kind of soothing, dreamy layers. It's uplifting. I don't know if Casey could ever write a better sort of singer-songwriter song ever. I'd question whether he could. I mean, and like Waves, I would say I would even put it among the top 50 songs maybe in the last decade. It's so good. But, like I said, that is the one song I think of this record the most for. But then I'll just go into some of the other parts. I mean, it's 15 tracks. A lot of it is like sweets, but I'll just get it out of the way. As far as there's a bunch of songs that are catchy that were singles. Revival, track number 5, and track number 10, Gloria. Both those songs were singles. I think they did videos for both of them. And they're both rather catchy and energetic with dynamics. Like this album maybe more than any record on the Axe series. It has the Deer Hunters sort of doing that kind of Faith No More. I'm not sure what the other example comparison could be, where they're doing like a sort of melodic and then heavy by complete. It's like a contrast. You think it'd be incongruous, but it does work together it flows together somehow. They're good. I mean, they're both good songs. Then it has like what I'd call sweets. I mean, this kind of sums up a lot of the record between the sort of catchy tracks, the one just standout over the top earworm track, Light, and then these sweets. I'd call them sweets. And the Deer Hunter records, especially the Ack records, the Color Spectrum really doesn't do, but the Ack records for the most part have these sort of bookend parts on a lot of the songs where the end of the song goes into something else. It started really, even on Act 1, especially on Act 2, and he never really stopped doing that, and he included it on Act 5, the last of the Acid records. So the sweets being track 2, The Moon Awake, track 4, The Most Cursed of Hands / Who Am I, and then what I would also say is a suite, even though it's not a suite with a slash in one track. Really, the last 3, a little bit like the ending of Act. This album does resemble Act 3 a lot, where you have the March, Blood, and a Beginning. I would say the flame is gone, the fire remains also could be tacked on almost in a way as a suite. Those two, that has the sort of track from Act 1, and I think they mentioned in at least one or two other acts, maybe Act 2, or no, Act 3. It's at the end of Act 3. The flame is gone, the fire remains, or the fire doesn't remain. Now, to talk about specific details on those suites, I'll give as much as I can remember. The Moon Awake is dreamy, and it has a sort of a what's the word? It's not a coda, segue or sort of. I think of it as maybe most for that ending where he mentions "Dear Apparition," the word apparition, of course, I associate with other things. Fate's Warning is a song called "The Apparition," and of course, Caddisfly did their last record just the year before this came out. When Act 4 came out a few months before that. They have a song called "The Apparition," the last track on Horses Galloping on Sailboats. So, but the Dear Apparition kind of calling to some higher power. And then I would say The Most Cursed of Hands and Who Am I has like this march, this heavy march. But when it gets to Who Am I, it gets kind of slower. So it's very much the dynamic. And other than like on some of the songs, like on the track before it, the Cascade has this dreamy element, but then it gets heavy at points. Less like the Revival too. So at points on this album, he's combining within a few seconds, going back and forth between tone and dynamics of styles. But on the case of the suite, The Most Cursed of Hands / Who Am I, it's almost like it goes from very, very heavy into very light or dreamy or coming down from the sort of build-up. So, as far as the suite that ends the album, I'll say The Flame Is Gone is kind of dark and brooding. I like parts of it, but The Fire Remains is great. And it reprises from Act 4, which I wouldn't be surprised if he wrote that and he kind of decided, I like that melody enough. From Act 4, the Old Haunt, which is great. But, the thing is, on The Fire Remains, and then on The March, Blood 2, I would say, there's a couple other tracks. Casey is almost yelling. I mean, it's similar to say what he did with A Mustard Gas, but even to a further extent. It's not death metal. It's not really even metal exactly, but he's just impassionedly screaming, and some of it is very melodic at points within that screaming. But The March also references another track that I'm forgetting now. But, I could say, like, Mr. Usher, I think of Mr. Malum from the Color Spectrum, but Mr. Usher, and there's a bunch of other Misters within the whole Act series. There's, I want to say Act 1 or Act 2. There's Miss Terry, the Choir Miss Terry, and then, I forget. I should know this. I should pull up the Act CDs. They're right around here. But that song is like ragtime. It's like Sinatra. It's very classic, vintage 70s. I mean, the ragtime style, which was sort of introduced and become at least a part of the Deer Hunter Sounds DNA, at least from the Act stories. But I always think that Casey just will bring in ragtime or vaudeville. He could do it on almost any song he writes. It's almost like a second nature thing, and it happens on that. That's just like their classic story of like some sort of investigator cop looking for someone, looking for Hunter, maybe, because it's Mr. Usher, always gets his man. It reminds me of like Sinatra or Tony Bennett, but it was a song from that period of time, like in the 30s maybe. So I think that's about it. There's a song called Melpomene, which is a weird title. And that's just a ballad. It's nice. It gives kind of a break for some of the intensity. This is a really intense record. And, the tree and just sort of the dark layers you could easily see when you would come up with artwork like this. The Devil and Confessional. I mean, the thing is, understanding the concept, like I said, I should do a separate video about it, but kind of just like trying to read through some more of the lyrics. The Dear Apparition thing, is he dying? Is this apparition sort of dictating his fate? And the Hunter character, I didn't mention the last episode in Act 4, which I have a couple more notes about that I forgot to add yesterday, but Hunter becomes like this sort of iconic celebrity performer artist of some kind, maybe, and then he maybe falls into some supernatural elements where is he a vigilante? Is he can do good, he's doing good, it's almost Jekyll and Hyde where he's doing things he regrets, but he's doing things that he means to do. He's battling, it's like his battle for his soul. He's divided where he's doing good things and he does things he regrets. Maybe it's the woman he's with, he cheats on her, something like that, or like he could save her and he doesn't because the devil is like giving him some kind of bargain. He's definitely sort of divided, archetype of a character, divided or torn, sort of conflicted character of, he's human, or he's supposed to be human, but he's approached by some supernatural force, whether can do the right thing or do something that will help, or it's a trade-off. It's like it's not black and white. It has to be somewhere in the middle. That's kind of what I think Casey was exploring to an extent with his character. And again, it's been done in many other stories, so it's hardly the first time it's been sort of explored and expressed in sort of a story of a character sort of coming of age and what they do. There's clearly a bunch of characters. The whole Act story is a bunch of... It centers around Hunter and his mother at one point and a call girl, but in here it's definitely talking about his child at one point, and I'm wondering if the daughter in Waves is referring to maybe the woman that ends up having the baby that's his son. The Dear Apparition podcast, which I've listened to, I probably went through this more in depth, and some of the people on the Facebook groups, involved regarding, and there are other websites that have dissected and, try to figure this out. I'm sure the graphic novel series have never been completed, but that would explore and explain a lot more details as to the story. And of course, if we ever get an Act 6, that would add and maybe explain even more details of what Casey intended for it, but I think a lot of it is somewhat ambiguous. But if I want to, I feel the need, I will maybe try to invest some time just to literally go through all the lyrics again and try to say, okay, this is what I think the story goes from here to here to here to here. But, like I said, this record, it's very dark, very layered, but I think it's a grower. If there is an act that's probably the most grower. I would say the same thing about Act 3, but after revisiting Act 3, I'm not as keen on it. But I'll say at points I'm kind of thinking, God, this is just very long and brooding, while there's a lot of highlights. And compared to Act 4, while it was recorded at the same time as Act 4, it's a different kind of album in a sense that Act 4, the songs sort of, and the album sort of identify with those songs more so. This album is sort of just a bunch of, it's like a suite. The whole thing could be one suite. It's not as specified, and it's probably, in that sense, much more of greater than some of its parts, as opposed to Act 4, which pretty much are the individual parts that are so great. And I think, I mentioned how Act 4 doesn't maybe flow as well as any of the other Act records. I think this album flows better, although given how long it is and sort of the style in general, the sound, the darkness and the textures, it doesn't flow as well as some of the other Act records. I don't know. But then again, all the Act records are long other than Act 1, so that perception, that observation could be made about all of them. So, I don't know, it's a record, when I first heard it, I thought, this is the first complete the Deer Hunter record from Act 1 to Act 5, that from beginning to end, that really flowed really well. And I'll definitely say that the suite at the end, or the ending 4 or 5 tracks, I'm much more, I definitely appreciate more than on Act 4. But, the other Act records with, the ending of Act 3, the ending of Act 2, for the most part, and the end of Act 1, all end pretty well too. That's why I kind of said that Act 4 is the only one that the ending doesn't work as well as the other ones. But I almost kind of see it as almost like a double album in some ways with Act. You could say that in the sense that, well, Act 4 ended the way it was because it wasn't really the end of that whole part of the story. So, anyway, what's your take on Act 5, Hymns with the Devil and Confessional? It was the last one that he did, and, if we ever get any more music in the Acts, I don't know, there's Act 6, which the belief is that it came out that it would be some kind of film, a movie. He ventured into the film area finally with The Indigo Child, that short film. I kind of wonder, it's a little bit like the Scenes from a Memory thing, or scenes from the Metropolis saga with Dream Theater. I don't know why it would be impossible him to someday write more music within this, but I would think it'd be a long time, because I know it was just sort of thing where he didn't really feel like doing it. He's like, I'm going to do it just to get it done, and really, to not to make the fans happy, but basically to do it for the fans, my gift to the fans, and then I could sort of put that to bed. He wanted to put the acts to bed for the most part, other than Act 6. I don't know. We'll see. 10, 20 years from now, if we get an Act 6, you never know. I mean, Coheed and Cambria was supposed to be done, I think, when they did 1 through whatever it was, 4, 4.5. They did 2 albums that were half parts. And then they continued, then they did 1 album that was within that concept, and then, or 1 album in the concept, 1 album not within the concept. They started doing prequels, so who knows, maybe his kid will do it. In 20, 30 years, when his children are musicians, they'll start writing music in the Act stories, if not, but I kind of doubt it, but, but it's a great record regardless. It's one of my top 5 records from 2016 still. But anyway, so what's your take on Act 6, Act 5, Hymns of the Devil and Confessional? Just give me your take on that. And, I'm going to do the rankings video. I'm going to do the EP. And I'm probably going to talk, I'll show like the live CD and the DVD if I can too, and maybe talk a little bit about those. I'm not going to be able to like watch the DVD probably, but what's your take on the acts? Give me your rankings down, or you can wait for that video. Give me your rankings of how you rank all the Deer Hunter albums, or just the Act albums. How do you rank all the Act albums? It's not an easy. I mean, it's really splitting hairs. So, but thank you for watching. We'll see you next time. I wanted to say something about Act 4. Where is it? I finally figured out what it was. So there's the song I meant to mention yesterday. The song "At the End of the Earth," track 4 in Act 4. It's like the 4-minute mark, I think it is. Has that riff, that blues riff, the da 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 da. The Thief from Act 3. That's. I don't know if people have pointed out. It only lasts for about a minute. I don't know if it was intentional or if the band considers that like a reprise or a reference to The Thief, but I hear it. I hear very similar, if not the same riff, that sort of building da 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 da. Another point I forgot to mention yesterday about Act 4. The whole get a God, get a job. Get a God from the Bittersweet 4 and 5. That get a God. Oh, get a God. Hoo, 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 hoo. Get a God. Get a God. Obviously the religious sort of church, thing in the sermon. But get a job in Evicted. So, they're blatantly obvious on the nose references. I just, the trivia loss escaped me. I never really did the research. But from people who, like to find the little nuggets and Easter eggs and references. I mean, there's probably a website, at least 1 or 2 websites, that goes over them thoroughly, like I did with Kevin. Maybe I'll try to do that at some point, or just kind of copy and paste and read that stuff off. But yeah, they should play Evicted back-to-back with Bittersweet 4 and 5, and then they should go into The Thief when they play that middle section at the end of the earth. Maybe they haven't. I don't remember. It's the question again for the fan group. I love the Deer Hunter. I'm a huge fan. I'm a very large fan, among one of the biggest fans among some people I know in progressive rock circles, but among their hardcore fan base, even though I'm a lifetime member, there are people that know this stuff much better than I do. Anyway, but thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.